Hello everyone, you're watching Ukraine Breaking News. My name is Maria Kahal and today we are talking to former US Ambassador to Ukraine, John Herbst. Hello John, it's nice to see you here.
Hi, nice to see you.
I would like to start from the US elections. They will be on November 5th. And who Ukrainians should vote, not vote, but like support?
That's for individual Ukrainians to decide. Obviously, they do not vote, but they make their own choices as who they'd like to see. I think that there are advantages and disadvantages, or possible disadvantages, to each candidate from a Ukrainian point of view.
What are benefits for Ukraine of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris specifically? What are their policies?
Harris is easier to describe. We can't be certain. She is her own person. But it's highly likely that her policy will be similar to Joe Biden's. And we know both the strength and the weakness of Biden's policy. He is providing substantial support to Ukraine. He has helped rally the international community in support of Ukraine, but he's also been intimidated by Putin's nuclear threats and has not provided the more advanced weapons Ukraine needs, made it a priority to help Ukraine win this war, and allowed Ukraine to use those weapons in a way that would enable it to win this war. And I think we'd see something very similar from Harris. With Trump, it's more complicated. There are two camps, you might say, amongst his campaign team. One understands that Russia is a threat to the United States. They are not intimidated by Putin's nuclear bluster. And I think they would provide, if they become the dominant voice in a Trump administration, they would make sure that American assistance to Ukraine continues, although it might turn from grant to loan. And they would not worry, they would arm Ukraine in a way that would help it make Putin's position in Ukraine untenable. In other words, they'd give Ukraine the arms it needs, tell Ukraine to use them as it sees fit. That's on the one hand in Trump camp. In Trump camp, though, there's also another point of view, another group that has no clue about how dangerous Putin's policies are for the United States, and who may very well abandon providing support to Ukraine or force Ukraine into a ceasefire or a peace negotiation, which would give Putin much of what he wants and enable Putin to come back for everything that he wants. So that's the different, very stark, different possibilities with the Trump victory.
And how would you rate Biden's term? Like, what could he done differently towards Ukraine?
Well, I've been very clear in my evaluation of Biden's policy. Again, he deserves credit for providing the right framework to deal with Russian aggression. And that framework has, several dimensions. One, large military and economic support to Ukraine. Two, big-time sanctions on Russia. Three, greatly strengthening NATO in the East. And four, isolating Russia to the extent we can. And that's the right framework, and he has done certainly an adequate job within that framework. But, as I've already mentioned, he has been intimidated by Putin's nuclear threats. His essential policy is put in two phrases: to stay with Ukraine as long as it takes, although over the past 6 months he's changed that to help Ukraine prevail, but two, to avoid an escalation of the conflict. And point two has weakened our policy because, again, intimidated by Putin's nuclear bluster, he has not given Ukraine the actual weapons, permission to use those weapons in a way that would lead to a Ukrainian victory.
So what could he done differently?
It's very simple.
In which points of this 2 years, what could he done differently exactly?
He should have decided from day one of the big invasion that we wanted to help Ukraine win. He would have had his national security team, and especially his generals and admirals, thinking very carefully about what tactics and what weapons Ukraine needs to drive Russian forces out of Ukraine, including Crimea, and he would have provided it. But of course he hasn't. He's dawdled at every opportunity when Ukraine was asking for the weapons that we should have been suggesting Ukraine receive. Even now, We talk about ATACMS, and we see the Biden administration unwilling to let Ukraine use the longer range ATACMS on Russian territory. But let's face it, ATACMS are not what Ukraine. Ukraine needs ATACMS, but there are more sophisticated weapons, more powerful weapons that we should be providing Ukraine. For example, like Tomahawks, which can fly a lot farther, strike much deeper into Russia than the ATACMS.
But how can we strike deeper if we don't have a permission to strike deeper?
That's correct. Yeah. I've already said that. We should allow Ukraine to use what it wants where it wants, and we should provide Ukraine much more powerful and more sophisticated weapon systems. We have dawdled in ways that cost Ukraine that offensive in 2023. If we had armed Ukraine with F-16s, with all the ATACMS we could have given at that time, they would have made Putin's position in Crimea very difficult a year ago. But instead we didn't. And then we criticized the offensive the Ukrainians conducted, even though we would never have permitted our armed forces to conduct such an offensive. So again, the weakness of the administration in pursuing its own policies is notable and problematic. That's what he should have done. Even now, he could fix this, but we see no intention of him doing it in his last 3 months in office.
And what I'm also curious about, that a lot of people say that Trump can end this war really quickly, and they believe in it, if Trump becomes president, of course. And what I'm curious about is, will he end this war by insisting on negotiations with Russia, or will he have this power to give Ukraine what we need to fight?
I think it's highly likely that he will look for negotiations right after he becomes president, or maybe even start before he becomes president if he wins the election. Although I'm not sure that makes sense, but it's possible. I don't see that as necessarily a problem. What would be a problem, a very serious problem, is if his insistence on negotiations means that he's willing to accept Russian claims on Ukrainian territory. That would be a major, major problem. And if his insistence on a settlement includes no actual security guarantees for Ukraine, that would be a serious problem. If those were to develop, those tendencies, that would be significantly a weaker policy than Biden's, and it's obviously very dangerous for Ukraine, but also a disaster for the United States. That's why I suspect even if he began to head in that direction, he would actually not continue, because the criticism he would face, including from people in the Republican Party, might persuade him that he does not want to be played for a weak man by Putin.
How do you see at this point a fair negotiations between Russia and Ukraine? How can we, deal and make this negotiation fair for both sides at this point of the war?
Look, Zelensky's right. If you want to have a fair outcome to this war, if you want to have eventually successful negotiations, you need to arm Ukraine to do better on the battlefield. That is clearly the most important thing the United States should be doing right now. And Biden, again, has sent a lot of arms to Ukraine, and that's good. But he has been weak in sending the more advanced equipment and allowing Ukraine to use it, which is bad. If Trump were to win, again, we don't know which way he would go. But if he decided that, yes, Putin was a bad faith actor and negotiations turned out to be a sham, and Trump would look like a patsy if he permitted Putin to do this, then I think he would arm Ukraine in ways that Biden was too timid to do. And that, of course, would be a very good thing.
Yeah, of course. But what about Kamala Harris? She also has a chance to win in this elections. And what would she do at this place? Because I heard that Kamala doesn't want to change anything from Biden's policies.
Look, I agree with you that she has a good chance of winning as well. This is a toss-up. We don't know who's going to win.
Yeah.
But she has, at this point, of course, she's a candidate. She is still in the Biden administration. She, at this point, has wrapped herself in Biden's policy towards Ukraine. and contrasted it with the view that Trump is going to be an appeaser of Putin to make herself look strong. Unfortunately, no one has questioned her about the weaknesses in Biden's policy and asked her if she would be stronger than Biden in sending arms to Ukraine and allowing Ukraine to use it. We know that her principal foreign policy advisor, Phil Gordon, in his public statements, and from what I hear from some of his private conversations, has not in any way distanced himself from Biden's policy. Now, again, he too is a member of the Biden administration, so that maybe that's just caution. But he was also the Assistant Secretary for European Affairs in Obama's first term. He supported the reset with Russia. He was not strong on dealing with the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Georgia. So I suspect that his outlook would be rather similar to the outlook of Jake Sullivan. I would hope it's close to the outlook of Tony Blinken, who's, I think, stronger than Sullivan on these things. But I don't know that for a fact. That's just hope.
Okay, and now we're seeing that Russia is building a lot of alliances, like they become stronger and stronger, especially with North Korea, China, and Iran. And I'd like to hear your opinion on that. Maybe United States will do something about it. Maybe will give us some permissions to use their weapons. Because now they said that they just will not give us another restrictions. But they won't, take down the previous one.
Look, it's almost as if the Biden administration is paralyzed in its last months. We have seen three disturbing developments going back to the late spring. Escalations by Russia against, not just against Ukraine, but also against the West. Since, May, June, there's been a great increase of Russian sabotage in NATO countries. There's been no NATO response to this. For the last several months, there have been an increasing number of Russian overflights with drones and missiles of NATO nations' territory, NATO nation airspace, heading towards Ukraine, and we've done nothing about it. And now you have North Korean troops heading for the war at a minimum in Kursk, but maybe also in Ukraine, and we've done nothing about it. This is the timidity we saw in the Biden administration seems to have now become paralysis. This is truly dangerous for maintaining the integrity of NATO, maintaining our NATO commitments, and of course, helping our partner Ukraine win this war. Biden could make a legacy in his last several months in office. He has chosen to stand stock still, and that is not good for the United States, that's for sure.
So this paralysis will be until the new president starts his or her term, right?
I am not a prophet, so I cannot read the future. I know there are some people in the Biden administration who understand how dangerous these things are and would like to have a serious American and NATO response to these Russian provocations. But right now, they seem to be unable to move not just the president, but those above them who think in a timid fashion. I'm not going to rule out some good measures by the Biden team after the election, but I'm also not counting on it. I'm certainly advocating for a stronger policy for Biden to go out with a sense of strength. But the record thus far, and especially the latest indicators, do not make me optimistic.
I understand that. And also I wanted to talk about a lot of new tensions in the world. China can invade Taiwan in any day, and tensions in Middle East, in Israel, like Iran, involving in all of these conflicts. How Ukraine can stay visible, like the war in Ukraine stay visible in United States, in Western countries, and for them not to forget about us?
The Ukraine war is visible. I don't think that Ukraine's position is made worse by inattention to the problem. Ukraine's position is made worse by the very, very timid instincts in the White House and also in the Chancellery in Berlin. That's the problem. That's the problem. And of course, that problem could become worse. Well, the problem may change if Trump wins and pursues a policy of appeasing Putin, which again, I'm not predicting that. I think that's less than 50%, but I can't say it's 0%. Ukraine needs to continue to the fight, as it will, effectively. And Ukraine's friends in the West, and I would say American patriots who understand the interests of the United States, need to push harder and more effectively for a stronger American policy and for a stronger NATO policy.
But can America be strong in all of the ways, because America protects Taiwan, protects Israel, protects Ukraine? They do so much.
The answer is yes.
Yes?
The answer is yes. It's yes. Because Russia, China, now North Korea in a very visible way, and Iran are working together against American interests. And they are all watching what we do, first and foremost in Europe, first and foremost in Ukraine. So American weakness in Ukraine, in the ways I've described, only encourage aggression in the Pacific, in the Middle East. Now, talking about the Middle East, all I can say is thank God for Israel, because they have delivered a punishing defeat to Iran and its proxies. And there, too, we saw administration timidity, discouraging Israel from striking hard. And I believe that Israel's strong strikes on Iran will mean, maybe it's already meaning, I can't say I've seen the information yet, it will mean less Iranian support for Russia in its war on Ukraine. South Korea, I think, is also reacting in a statesman-like manner to this latest news about North Korean involvement in the war on Ukraine and wants to provide support for Ukraine. If they step up, that will be a net gain for Ukraine in the war. In other words, South Korea's help for Ukraine will be more important than North Korea's help for Russia, in my opinion, if South Korea decides to act. And that might also embarrass the American administration, be it Trump or Harris or now Biden, to do the right thing. I believe, as do the leaders of Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea, that the best way to deter China from invading Taiwan is to pursue a strong policy in Europe that defeats Putin. We have not seen that strong policy under Biden. We'll see what we get with the next president.
And also, I would like to end with this interview with Israel, how you see the situation there, and what United States, maybe next president, should do in that region, because it's like never-ending war there, and now it's even bigger than ever.
We have been as timid in the Middle East, maybe even more timid than we have been in Europe. Starting well over a year ago, there have been several hundred attacks on American soldiers and American ships in the Middle East, coming from various Iranian proxies. Our responses were truly weak, even pathetic, up until they hit and killed 3 American soldiers. And then our response was not quite strong, but not irrelevant. If the response we did after our soldiers died had preceded their death, maybe they wouldn't have died. And when we've struck, we've only struck at the proxies of Iran. We know that without Iranian technology, without Iranian funds, without Iranian expertise, the Houthis and various militias in the Middle East would not be able to attack American soldiers. So we had every right to take a strike at Tehran for these attacks. And of course, we've done nothing against Iran. And we've discouraged Israel from striking strongly against Iran. So again, the same timidity, which is a very polite word, which characterized this administration in Europe, is even more evident in the Middle East which again cuts against American interests.
So the main point is that the United States just needs a stronger leader and stronger policy towards every tensions in the world.
Well, I'm not going to say every tension in the world. There may be something there which requires a truly nuanced approach, but sometimes nuance is necessary. For nuanced purposes, you need to be strong, and that's something I don't think that this administration has ever understood.
Who do you think will win these elections, in your opinion?
I don't know. I'm watching carefully. Actually, I have an opinion, but I'm not going to talk about that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for this interview. It was a nice time. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.